to Buckets, brought to you by BetMGM, the king of sportsbooks. My name is Matt Moore. I'm the senior NBA writer for the Action Network, and this is your How to Bet the NBA in-season tournament. Heads up, the NBA has implemented for 2023-24 a new in-season tournament. You're playing for the cup. There's an awesome ad out about it. Go check out YouTube and just search for the Heist NBA. It's absolutely phenomenal. It's got Kawhi Leonard in it. Kawhi actually showed up for a thing and was funny and cool. And so there's group play, which we can bet on. There's tournament play, which we can bet on. And there's tournament MVP, which we can bet on. This thing was made for NBA gamblers. We've got tournament games and group play all throughout the month of November, starting on Friday, November 4th. We're recording this on October 31st, Halloween night. And we're going to give you the breakdown of how this tournament works. But more importantly, because this is Buckets and this is what we do here, we're going to tell you how to bet this thing. And to help me do that, bringing on newcomer, first time on the pod, Andrew O'Connor Watts. Andrew, thanks for doing this with me, man. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. This is a really exciting new feature that the NBA has implemented, and eager to get down to it, talk about how to bet it.
Everything we talk about today can be found in the award-winning Action Network app. It's the best way for you to track your picks. You get up-to-the-second information where the bets and money are coming in on. You can track things in there like group winners. So you can track all the bets we're going to talk about today in the Action Network app. Also, make sure to check out youtube.com/The Action Network. Not only are we going to have this episode up there for your consumption, I did a whole video trying to explain the in-season tournament. We'll talk a little bit more about that in today's episode, but if you want like the TLDR on it, you can go to youtube.com/The Action Network, and we'll make sure that that's reposted on Friday heading into the first night of tournament games. So, Andrew, I think the first thing that we kind of got to do is I got to go through and kind of explain what this thing is, because we got to explain how this thing works. And when I was looking at the tournament and started to prep for this episode, I was like, what do people need to know? Like, what do you actually need to know? The biggest thing is that they have separated out all 30 teams into groups, new groups of 5. So instead of your divisions, you play in a group that's based off of buckets off of last year's regular season win percentage. So their goal was they wanted like essentially a bad team, a not so great team, 2 okay teams, and then 1 good team. So for example, in Group A, the Memphis Grizzlies, which finishes the 2 seed in the Western Conference last season, are in Group A as that team at the top. Phoenix Suns and Los Angeles Lakers, who both finished between 47 and 44 wins, wind up in that one as well. Utah Jazz, that finished with 39, and then you got the Portland Trailblazers, who of course tanked their faces off. And so what you have here now is you have this group, and what's interesting is that because it was based on last year, you have a lot of changes. And so obviously the Phoenix Suns have made huge upgrades, and the Lakers think that they've made huge upgrades. Haven't looked great early. The Jazz are not necessarily the same team that they were last year. So these teams are a little bit different, and that's what makes, I think, this really interesting. They'll play 4 games throughout the month of November, and it's not, so with it being 4 games, you play 2 at home and 2 on the road. And based off of which ones you have on the at home or on the road, that's going to impact, I think, a lot of our handicap for looking at how to bet this thing. Those winners will then advance to the quarterfinals. Those are held in the home markets. So the team with the best record in group play, if you go 4-0, okay, or based off of tiebreakers, if multiple teams go 4-0, they'll host a wild card team from each conference. So that's the team basically that finishes with the next best record that doesn't win its group. They'll match them up. It's an 8-team tournament. They'll play on Monday, December 4th, Monday, December 4th, and Tuesday, December 5th. The winners of that will advance to the semifinals in Las Vegas, Nevada on December 7th, and then the championship game on December 9th. Should be an absolutely incredible night in Las Vegas on the 9th. There's new courts, which everyone is very happy to have extreme opinions on. The NBA is trying to separate this and make it its own event. We'll get to kind of the dynamics of how we think this is going to work, but that's how this breaks down. Real quick overview of this. If you're wondering, okay, how do you win the group? Okay, you play 4 games. If you go 3-1 and another team goes 3-1, you have a tiebreaker. Tiebreakers are head-to-head record in the group stage. So if the Grizzlies and Lakers wind up 3-1 with the best records in group, and the Lakers beat the Grizzlies, the Lakers win the group. that's how this works out. And it'll be the same thing for deciding the wild card teams, etc. It's head-to-head record, then point differential in group, then total points scored in group, which that's interesting because it's going to make me lean towards some of the offensive teams. Regular season records from the 2022-23 regular season. And then if you get through all of those and it's even, you'll end up with a random drawing. We will never really get there. For what you can bet in this tournament, you can bet group winners, you can bet tournament winners, and you can bet tournament MVP. You also have a number of specials for each group over at various books, so you'll have to check that out as well. You can catch things like Nikola Jokic to average a triple-double in group play, or the Nuggets to go 4-0. Those are out there as well. And we're going to see some, I think, weird derivatives in this market as we get closer to the start of the tournament. My first question for you, Andrew, to get you kicked in here now that I've gone through the basics of the tournament. How does this compare to kind of other sport leagues? And what do you see as like, how does that frame your approach to betting this tournament?
Yeah, so I mean, the first thing that I thought of when this whole idea came around was the FA Cup in English soccer.
Mm-hmm.
It's a similar in-season tournament across multiple leagues, the top of which being the Premier League, and all of these teams compete throughout the season. There's a, it's not the same style of group play, but it's a similar in that the games, don't totally matter as much until you kind of get further down the line. So for what often ends up happening, right, is that the initial games are played by some of the reserves, and some of the veterans will sit out some of these matches. But as it gets further and some of these stronger teams keep making it further and further, it kind of narrows the pool. You get teams playing a rival maybe, and they start to care a little bit more. So what I kind of took from that is you want to look at, or what I was looking at is long shots more so in the group stage. And if you want to take, I would say if you want to take favorites to kind of, I think there's more value in taking them to win the whole thing rather than to win their group. Just because, first of all, we don't really know if these teams are going to care, especially the championship contender type teams. I know the Warriors mentioned that they were actually going to go for it and try to win for Chris Paul, I think they said. And so we'll see. They were actually one of the teams, though, that I was looking at as maybe someone to stay away from, just being older and more likely to rest guys. But I was looking more at these kind of longer shots for the group play, which has kind of played into a few of the picks that I made for that group stage.
Yeah, and Brandon Anderson, who's tied up with the million words that he writes on football every week, he's approaching this the same way, where he's very much looking for the long shots across the board in each of these group play segments, because it's effectively, if you have any of these games where an upset occurs, if the Blazers beat the Suns just because it's a random game in November, that can absolutely flip things in a very dramatic way and puts the Blazers in a much higher chance of being able to sneak this out, and will shorten their odds dramatically. These odds are staggered pretty severely if we kind of look at them towards the favorites, because in essence, the books wanted to offer these things up there, but they also were in a spot where you're kind of tied to the power rating. So you have to have things in here related to, oh, well, the Celtics are way better than everybody else, so they need to be clearly as this like significant favorite as we look through this the odds for the tournament, which I think is like a really fascinating kind of way that this kind of shakes out. Like the Celtics are favored to win the tournament. They are plus 700. The Nuggets are plus 900. The Bucks are plus 900. The Suns are 11-1. If you're asking, doesn't that sound like the championship odds? Yeah, it's pretty close. Like it's not all that dissimilar from the championship odds, which guess what? Celtics plus 400, then Bucks at plus 450, but they can't beat them in their own, conference. Nuggets plus 500, Suns plus 550, Clippers plus 1200. So you kind of see the similarity between those two. Now they've adjusted them a little bit. You can hear kind of some of those numbers. But what I think is interesting is you mentioned this, and it's a big question I think everybody has. Are they going to try? Are they going to care? Which, as an aside, pretty annoyed that I even have to ask this fucking question. That I have to be like, are you going to try and do your jobs that you get paid millions of dollars to play? Could you do that for us? What is happening? Why can't I just trust these guys to be like, no, like, and I'll say this. I think the group stage will be normal NBA basketball. I think the tournament stage will probably be something in between regular season and playoffs. So kind of play-in tournament-esque. Maybe not as severe as the play-in tournament, because if you lose in the play-in tournament, your season's over, right? So something like below play-in tournament, a third tier above regular season play. Teams are not going to game plan and do in-depth film research and change their rotations like they would in the playoff series to win an in-season group stage game. The Nuggets play the Mavericks on Friday. The Nuggets will play their normal rotation. If somebody's hurt, they won't play. If they have a bad ankle, they're not going to be like, I'll play through it because this is a tournament stage game. That won't happen. And even if it's not the Nuggets who have championship aspirations, if it's the Pacers and Tyrese Halliburton or somebody else, if Obi Toppin has a bad ankle, he might go in a playoff game to be like, no, I got to play in this game. He will not do that in a group tournament game. But once you get them in Las Vegas for the semifinals, in particular, the quarterfinal games will feel pretty similar to like a normal game. And they are. That should be noted, by the way. The quarterfinal games are regular season games. They count towards the regular season games. The semifinals and finals do not. When you get them in that environment where it's win or go home, I am counting on one extreme factor to carry us in terms of their effort in the later stages of the tournament, which is, I may not want to win, but I don't want that fucking guy to win. And I'm really counting on that being what carries us home. Like, if we look at these groups, the Houston Rockets are in Group B with the Nuggets, the Clippers, the Pelicans, the Mavericks, and the Rockets. Okay? If the Rockets were to get the wild card and the Mavericks were to get in the tournament, win the group stage, and those two were to play in the semifinal game, like, not entirely insane to think about. If those two played in a semifinal game and Dylan Brooks is running his mouth, Luka Doncic may not care whether he wins the in-season tournament, but Dylan Brooks is not fucking winning this game and sending me home. And that's the kind of thing that I'm kind of banking on carrying us through, is when you put the most competitive players in a competitive environment, I think they'll try. You kind of mentioned about the idea of, are they going to, in soccer, they would actually change rotations, I've heard. Like, they will actually actively shuffle through who's playing, who's not in those games, depending on what their aspirations on the season are. Am I correct on that?
Yeah. I mean, I think, I don't know that we'll see. It's different because they'll have maybe like entire different units almost in soccer. So it's a little bit different in that sense, but just in the sense that, like you just mentioned, we're going to probably see a little bit more attention to rotation and winning these higher leverage games as it progresses past the group stage.
Yeah. So here's what I'll say about, because there was kind of this idea almost immediately, which is like, oh, so like the Bucks will just like rest Giannis in one of these games. I have a very strong feeling that the NBA has sent strongly worded memos to these organizations being like, we are negotiating a new media deal, which in fact billions of dollars for us. Do not fuck with us. And to that notion, look, I've complained a lot about the resting early in the season. If you look at how the first 2 weeks of the season are built, like the Nuggets have a 5-7 and 7-9 right off the bat. A lot of teams face a lot of these. And once I started to look at it, I was like, oh, it's because they don't have any of them on tournament nights. They've removed the back-to-backs from tournament nights. And so what they did was they tried to clean out all these back-to-backs from November, which means all of these teams have them early on. And that's why teams are resting, because they're like, look, we can't rest them in November. They're going to have to play in these tournament games because otherwise the league's going to kill us. And so I do think that there will be a greater attention to detail. There may be a front office or two, a training staff or two, that just says like, look, man, we're trying to win a title. The guy's in the red. He needs a break. He can't go. We got to rest him. And that will cause a hubbub. Like, it'll be bad, and the league will have to kind of manage it to do it. But we've already seen that the training staffs are very much like, yeah, so I don't really care about your TV deal. I don't want to get fired because our guy got an ACL tear. And that's kind of how that power dynamic shakes out. But I am pretty confident that we'll see very few pure rest nights throughout the group stage. Does that track with you?
Yeah, it does. But I still think, but I do think that some of the teams with less championship aspirations might take it a little more seriously. I think you might see these like that's kind of how I approached this. Was I actually started kind of eliminating teams on who to bet on. Like I wanted to look at, first of all, talent. Like, you got to be good to win, right? I mean, the Blazers could care the most, and they're just not going to. I don't think they're going to win enough games. They might be worth a stab on the long shot price, but I was looking to kind of this middle tier where I don't want the like old veteran championship contenders. I don't want the Lakers. I don't want like the Clippers. I don't want that kind of tier, but I also don't want these, the Wizards or the Blazers, as I mentioned, or someone like that. So, I was kind of targeting these middle tier teams that are good enough to make a splash, good enough to make some noise, but also not too concerned about, May and June. Right.
Yeah. And I think that that's the right way to go about it. I'll tell you my processes. We'll move into we'll give our best bets for the group stage, and then we'll talk about the overall tournament. My process was a lot more convoluted, which is I had power ratings this summer, and then I asked some friends who are better with scripting than I am, and I actually ran a simulation on it. So we did 10,000 simulations based off of my power ratings and the schedule provided to come up with the outcomes of what these games were. Now, my power rating was based on an assumption that Steven Adams was not going to get ruled out for the week before the season started. So that one's a little bit dead because I definitely had the Grizzlies as definitively the best in their group. But I still like a lot of the picks that I went ahead and put in the app. I still think that they're in good position to win these kind of games. And that's what's kind of interesting is they're teams that I have power rated pretty highly, but they're also teams with favorable schedule outcomes, because that's the big key here is I have projections on all of those games off of power rating adjusted for home court. And that's the big key here is that if you face certain teams at home, the Celtics versus the Nets, right? Like, I've got the Celtics with a 76% chance of winning that game based off of their middle of the offseason power rating, like a 76% chance of winning that game. Well, if they're in Brooklyn, that's going to drop down to like 60% because it's a huge swing in power rating based off of that. This is a very nerdy way of going about this. What I wanted to do is I just wanted to kind of try it as a test drive. It's basically this is an exercise for me in could my offseason power ratings and the schedule analysis get us to a spot. I wish I'd done it this week after the Steven Adams news, but I'm not going to have time to do that. Thanks, James Harden. Appreciate that, Daryl Morey, for doing that deal at 1 o'clock in the morning. But I still kind of like a lot of these picks. Well, let's go through this one by one. So Group A in the West is Grizzlies, Suns, Lakers, Jazz, and Blazers. Is there a lean that you've got for that group? As I'll give the market consensus odds right now for that group, which is Lakers plus 150, Suns plus 210, Grizzlies plus 300, Jazz at 850, and the Portland Trailblazers at 17-1. What do you like in that group?
Yeah, I mean, this is actually one of the groups that I had the toughest time with. A big part of that being the Steven Adams news, and I'm trying not to react too much to early season games, but I'm only human. I can't help it. I gotta react a little bit. One of those reactions or potential overreactions is the Suns and how good they've looked even without Booker and without Beal yet. I think their defense has looked good. I've been surprised at how good it's looked. That was one of the question marks going in, was their defense and their depth. And it seems like in the first 3 games, at least, or I think it's 3, that has not been as much of a problem as I initially thought it would be. The Grizzlies, again, I would say are probably my favorite still, but I mean, like the rest of the action cohort, I have a lot of Grizzlies liability already, and I'm not really looking to add to that potential pain. So, but yeah, I guess I would still have to say the Grizzlies. I think they could make a move, and yeah, just at the number. I mean, I think the Suns and the Lakers, I don't want anything to do with the Lakers, as I mentioned. I had initially put the Suns in that don't want anything to do with them category. I've upgraded them based on a small sample size into a I'm intrigued. But I don't know if that number, what was the number you said that for the group stage again?
Group stage Grizzlies is 3-1.
Or for Suns.
Sorry, Suns is, I've got plus 210.
Plus 210. Okay. Yeah. I guess I would lean Suns. I would, if it was a little bit longer, I'd probably go with it. But I don't want to overreact to the just a couple games. So I think Suns would be probably my lean in that group. But yeah.
I mean, in general, I think you're with me that this is probably the one you want to stay away from, right?
Yeah.
That
absolutely.
Here, but I will say, look, shop around. Here's an interesting example of why you need to shop around. There is in the market, a Lakers plus 150, Suns plus 210, and at another book, Suns plus 140, Lakers plus 215.
Yeah.
So if you think that, and I will be honest with you, I think I'm probably gonna arb this with those two, is that I'm gonna bet the Lakers and Suns at those long odds, the longest odds between that's in the market. Shop around as always, and get us and get the best value on that, because I'm at the point with the Grizzlies. Luke Kennard comes back tomorrow. I'm going to see what that looks like for them. We're recording this on Tuesday, but Derrick Rose minutes have been a disaster. LaRavia minutes have been a disaster, and they're playing David Rowdy at power forward. They don't have a big. They're going to get, after they play the 5th game, they get to add Bismack Biyombo. And if you're like, really, Matt, Bismack Biyombo is going to save the day? I just want someone who's over 6'4" to play in the backup front court. That's all I'm asking for. Biyombo would legitimately help the Grizzlies considerably. So I do kind of think that there's some value in that. I just don't know if I want to get in on that immediately. One thing interesting with the schedule on this one, if we kind of break it down as far as who's got who at home. So the Lakers go to the Suns. Okay, right? They're going to be dogs in that game. They have the Grizzlies at home. They'll be favored. That's the second or third best team in this group. They're on the road for the worst team with the Blazers, and they're at home versus the Jazz, who are peskier. So if you're asking me for one best bet, I would probably go with the Los Angeles Lakers now. Shop around, find that number 215 or longer, and that to me seems like the best value, because Suns have a little bit of a different one where Phoenix hosts the Lakers. Great for them. That's like a tough game, but they are at Utah. That's that middle tier, and that's a tougher spot for them just a little bit, especially with Beal and Booker still out as we're recording this on Tuesday night. And then they're at home for the Blazers, but your odds aren't going to, it's not going to be a significant difference on the Blazers. You should win that game anyway. And then they're at Memphis. And yes, they should win that game because Memphis is bad, but I will note they play Memphis much later in the tournament. They play them on November 24th towards the end of the month. So if Memphis gets its shit together, that's a tougher game in Memphis. So right now I would definitely lean towards the Lakers.
Can I throw out one little potential? You mentioned an ARB situation for those two teams. You said Suns and Lakers, right? For the ARB. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what if, since they, like you mentioned, the Suns are at home for the first Lakers game, would it make sense to go Suns plus 210, kind of thinking that they're supposed to win that game, and then taking the Lakers after game one of those in-season bets, or of those in-season games?
Yeah, I like that. That's good. That's also smart. That's one of the things that I think is going to be fascinating as we learn how to do this, because this is the first time we're doing it. We're going to have opportunities to bet this in tournament on these things, which I'm really fascinated by. Programming note: there's no games on Tuesday night next week in the NBA for Election Day. Jim Turvey, Joe Dallaire, and I are recording a special in-season tournament reaction to the first bracket of games on Friday night, and we'll go through all these scenarios of how to bet if X, then Y. And we'll get into all those scenarios on the Tuesday episode. Let's go to West Group B. And as we look at that one, it's the Denver Nuggets, defending champion Denver Nuggets, who are on a tear right now, plus 170. The Clippers with new addition James Harden, plus 220. The Dallas Mavericks, plus 360. The New Orleans Pelicans, plus 440. And the Houston Rockets, 19-1. What's your best bet for this group?
So my best bet is the Pelicans. I found a plus 40, plus 475.
Nice.
To win West Group B. That they were kind of the epitome of that middle tier team of like, they're not in that championship range, but they're good enough to make some noise and do some damage. Of course, a lot of these I kind of was looking at more closely before the season started. Part of my cap on this was, the Nuggets are going to not have to, they're not going to care, right? They're not going to care as much. Jokic barely cares about NBA at all, it seems like, let alone a made up tournament that, is the first year of, which, I'm excited about, but I can't imagine he probably just wants to hang out with his horses and look, I don't blame him, but, but 3-4 games in, whatever we are, by the time you watch this, the Nuggets, they might not care, and they're still destroying everybody. So it almost, I don't know. Part of me is thinking, look, I would hate to come on Buckets my first appearance and give out the defending champs as a best bet, but maybe am I overthinking this? Should we just take the Nuggets to win the in-season tournament? I think there was an 11-1 out there. Okay. All right.
No, so one, this is we're recording this on Tuesday after they got by the Jazz on a back-to-back.
Yeah.
Recency bias is going to be really powerful because we only have this sample. But if the Nuggets won 4 games in a row to start in the middle of January, we wouldn't blink an eye. We'd be like, yeah, the Nuggets are good. Of course they won 4 in a row, but they've won 4 in a row to start the season. So it's like, will the Nuggets ever lose again? And look, I'm in the building. These guys are ready to go. But I will say this, look at their schedule. Because again, we get back to the schedule analysis. They're at home for the Clippers. They'll want to win that game. I will like the Nuggets in that game. But they're at Pelicans. They've had trouble throughout the years with Zion, particularly in New Orleans. That's a tough spot. They're at Houston. That's probably a win. Okay, so that's 2-1 going to the final game, which starts with Friday's game versus the Dallas Mavericks. This is my best bet for this group, which is I like the Dallas Mavericks in this spot. I like the Pelicans as well. I may bet Pelicans too because their upside is really tempting. However, there is a pretty decent chance that if the Nuggets lose to the Wolves on Wednesday, I will probably bet Pelicans because I think the Nuggets are going to be like, we're not losing 2 in a row. We're especially not losing at home. But if they beat the Wolves and they start out 5-0 and they didn't play well last night, they will be one of those we're not playing great, but we're winning. That's when you want to fade Denver. And so that's a spot where I think Luka, who's been as ridiculous as his MVP status as far as the odds go, kind of indicates. He's been amazing. They might have Kyrie back for that game. If they were to pull off the upset in Denver, all of a sudden the Mavericks odds change. So I will probably, I already have a bet on Dallas. I will probably add a Pelicans position. And then if the Nuggets lose on Wednesday night, and again, you'll hear this after that game, but if the Nuggets were to lose to the Wolves, I will probably come back and bet the Nuggets because then they'll be 3-1 because I think that they beat the Mavericks, beat the Rockets, and beat the Clippers. And that's a 3-1 spot for them, and that might be good enough to win the group. So that's kind of how I look at this game planning scenario. I don't want the Clippers. I don't. They've been really good, but I think they're inconsistent, and I don't like the matchups. Pelicans, I think, are a good long shot because they're in that range that we've talked about. I could absolutely see the Pelicans pulling this off. Like I could 100% because they get the Nuggets at home, and that's huge. They play the Mavs at home and the Nuggets at home. They're on the road for the Clippers. That's a winnable game. And then at the Rockets. So that's a winnable game as well. And, they start with the Rockets, so they could go ahead and get that one out the way and get on a good start. Now, we got to get Zion and the Pelicans through a month healthy, which isn't fun. But I do think that if you're going to bet this, Mavericks or Pelicans, I do think are the best value on the board.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, definitely my least favorite part of the cap is the Zion health factor. I will say though, if we just look at last season against the Nuggets specifically, and you mentioned it being in New Orleans, so that's obviously already a good thing for the Pelicans. They beat them without on December 4th last year. They beat them without Ingram. They lost by 1 without Ingram and Zion in January. And they won in March without Jokic though, and then lost their final at the end of January. I did that in out of order, but they went 2-2, and 2 of those games were no Ingram and 1 with no Zion. Yeah, that was part of what I liked about it, was just that head-to-head record against the Nuggets, because Clips and Mavs will definitely can definitely play spoiler, but as you mentioned, the value there is with the Pelicans. So
the final group in the Western Conference, we've got the Warriors market. There's a 195, the Kings plus 220, the Wolves plus 340, the Thunder plus 360, and the San Antonio Spurs and Victor Wembanyama 23-1. You don't have a play on this one. I just want to kind of get, you have like a lean as if you look at that group and what you think.
Yeah, I mean, so I guess my lean would be to the Wolves. I liked them coming into the season, and again, I mean, probably just recency bias. They've not looked good. And again, it's just a small sample size. I'm just keep saying that more to myself, I think, to not, psych myself out too much. But yeah, I was leaning to the Wolves. I thought, I think having like a full, of half season with Conley, Cat coming back in the mix, it's not the best pairing in the world with him and Gobert, but at least getting some time to figure that out and get some continuity. I would say Wolves probably, but I mean the Thunder are just very fun. I think the Thunder are another great look there. Part of the reason I stayed away as well is that that's another really good group. That's a really tough group. It's hard to kind of predict how that's going to shake out, and there's just a little bit more variance overall. So, that's part of why I stayed away.
I will say that I have a bet on the Wolves because I had them power rated really high. I'm probably going to add a Thunder this week because they are longer at the books consensus than the Wolves, except for at one spot where they're tied with them at 4-1. And so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take a 4-1 on the Thunder, and I'll have a Thunder and a Wolves bet. I mean, look, it's the Warriors have said they want to win this thing, and I get that. That makes sense. And they've looked good. They've got the Wolves at home and the Spurs at home. So that's like an auto win, right? The Warriors are on the road, and they've been better on the road. Kerr made mention of it last night. He was like, last year was a fluke. We're past that. They're at the Kings on the last game of the tournament. They start with the Thunder. So you're at Kings, at Thunder. That's tough. Like if you're going to two teams in this tournament or in this group that I don't want to go to, those are the two I don't want to go to. I don't want to go to Sacramento and face the Beam, even though if you're listening, you're like, well, the Warriors just beat them there. Yes, it's tough to beat a team twice at home. So it's like, show me you can do it again.
Right.
I'm definitely not like, oh no, the Warriors are not good. But again, if the point that we're trying to kind of reiterate here over and over and over again is that these middle tier longer shots, I think, have a lot more value because of the ability for them to get a one-off versus, Brandon, I think, is very much leaned towards the longer guys in each one. Like, he wants some of these random teams. And that's surprising to me. I think that he would probably say, well, not random, not the Blazers, but he definitely wants any sort of these teams that are longer. And that's where I think it gets interesting as we go to the East, because that's where, to me, the East is where we get real value on a lot of these. Let's start with Group C, actually, in the East. The Boston Celtics are a minus 150 at one book. The Raptors plus 550. The Bulls plus 550. The Nets plus 650. And the Orlando Magic plus 850. This is going to be, I think, a really interesting one to try and dissect as far as like when we're trying to break this down. Do you have a lean or a play for this Group C with the Celtics very firmly at the top?
I do. So I have a bet on the Bulls to win this group. For some of the reason I mentioned before, I think they have continuity from last season. They got two additions that I think are notable, or at least somewhat notable, in Javon Carter and Torrey Craig, kind of addressing some issues. They're kind of more fringe guys, but they're addressing some of the weaknesses that the Bulls had last season, which was 3-point shooting. And for Javon, not so much a weakness, but he's a great defender, great perimeter defender. I just think both of those guys fit well. Torrey Craig, whatever, but can shoot some threes, which they needed. But mostly it's that continuity. I think I feel like they're going to actually want to win this. Like that's another thing. I'm trying to predict motivation in this a little bit. I think because we don't have that historical context, you and Brandon are really good at finding these historical contexts for awards markets and that kind of thing. We don't have that, but
we don't have them. They don't exist.
We don't. The cool thing though is that neither do the books. So it's a little bit of a bet your opinion kind of market, as long as you're diligent in the research you do, right? So part of that was, when I'm looking at this Bulls team, I'm looking at, I think they have a high floor, and I want a team with a higher floor than a team that has for this group stage at least, then has a high ceiling but a lower floor, right? So to me, it's kind of, I was debating between the Bulls and the Magic, because they're at pretty much the same price. We have an 11-1 for actually both the Magic. I believe both the Magic and the Bulls, they are longer odds than the Nets and the Raptors. I think both of those teams, just give me like even odds for everybody, I would put the Bulls and the Magic ahead of the Raptors and the Nets. So if you're going to give me longer odds, I would rather just take those longer odds. Obviously, the Celtics are the best team far and away in that group, no question. But, for the Magic, at least, because I could be talked into the Magic as well, I think is kind of where I'm going with this. The Magic were 3-1 against the Celtics last year. Different team. But really, like, I guess my thing is, I want to attack this group because of because of the numbers just being off, which is why I targeted the Bulls and why if you give me a good case for the Magic, I'll go there. But I'm curious to hear what you think about this group.
I don't have a best bet for this one. This is the only one I don't have a best bet on. Now, based off of the numbers that I've got, I do have Chicago as having the best value. Let's define that, because everyone says that in the gambling podcasts and videos. The value.
Right. Positive EV, right?
Yeah, positive EV. But we can quantify it here. So because I did these simulations, if Chicago is the team that I thought that they would be, and having a players only meeting on the first night of the season was not the start I wanted to that particular projection, but I've got them at about a 24% chance of winning this group. Okay. The Celtics I have at a 48% chance of winning this group. That's extremely high, right? For just like winning 4 games,
for sure.
Having the best record out of 4 games, they have a 48% chance based off of the simulations that I did. At 800, which there's a number in the market, that's an 11% chance. So I've got a 13% edge here on the Bulls. So I should be betting them. and I'm tempted to. I really like. Look, my heart wants to bet the Magic. I love this Magic team. They're so much fun. Like they're just the most. They are the most fun of this group. It would be the coolest to see the Magic win this group. This young team goes to the tournament, somehow makes it. Like it would be awesome. I'm hoping that that happens, even if I don't make money on it. I will bet them in the tournament games if they get there because I think that they'll be more motivated than some. But look, the Bulls have the Nets at home. I don't know. Like I have that as a 60-40 game in win percentage. That's not. That doesn't make me feel awesome. I do have them as a significant edge versus the Magic, which I actually think I probably am going to upgrade. Like I've already upgraded Orlando in power rating, so that number based off of where I had this summer is already more narrow because I think the Magic are better than they were. And essentially, inherently, I don't have a bet on this because I have the Magic better. And if the Magic are better, then the Bulls' chances are lower. And the Magic chances might be higher and there might be value there, but not enough to really get me there. The other thing is like, look, this is very important to remember when we're talking, because you talked about the motivation factor, and I want to kind of like hone in on that. One of the things that's being, I think, misconstrued when we talk about it is, well, they're not going to care about it. Okay, that might be true, but they're not going to actively not care about it. It's a regular season game. It counts towards their home total. It counts towards their playoff seeding. If you're the Boston Celtics, then you want the number 1 seed because you would much rather be in the Garden for Game 7, albeit last year's conference finals Game 7 did not go great. But you would rather be in a Game 7 versus Milwaukee at home than in Milwaukee, right? So there's reason to win these games anyway. And that to me is why I'm staying away. Boston also, just in general, has a very, like, we're not tryhards. It's not a Tibbs team. But they give good effort every night. I never watch the Celtics. Not never. I very rarely watch the Celtics and are just like, God, these guys just do not give a shit tonight. Most of the time, the Celtics give a shit. And that's largely built off of Tatum. Tatum's young and takes his job seriously, and Jalen does too. Like they're a professional, they're a serious organization, and that's why I don't really want to bet into them. Is Chicago's foibles, I think, are a good example of why I think that they're dangerous. I get where you're coming from on them, and like I would love to see DeMar DeRozan win, finals tournament MVP. That'd be a really cool story. But I can't get there on the bet. But I think it's interesting that you've got that one on there. You have thoughts on any of that?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned like the Pelicans bet being Zion being my least favorite part of the cap. So my least favorite part of this Bulls pick is just how good the Celtics are, right? And the motivation thing, right? I mean, they're kind of in that Nuggets camp where they could not care and still win. So yeah.
Let's talk about East Group B. Speaking of the Bucks minus 120. We got a minus number in this. Like, come on, seriously, like, come on, minus 120. The Heat plus 300. The New York Knicks plus 340. The Charlotte Hornets plus 1200, and the Washington Wizards at 29-1. Of this group, I do have a best bet, and is a best bet shared by pretty much all of Action. We're all going to be on this. I'll be interested to see what Andrew says, but everybody else, we like the New York Knicks. That's the one that we're really honed in here. Knicks, there's a plus 425 I see in the market. There's also a plus 400, and obviously a plus 340 at one book. You can get as high as plus 400 for the Knicks. This just screams a Tibbs thing. Regular season, try harder, get it done. The Bucks are not infallible. Like this team, there's a lot of holes on Milwaukee. They let the Heat with a bad Jimmy Butler and no Bam Adebayo get back into that game shooting threes again. The Knicks, their schedule, they're at the Wizards. That feels like a win. They're at home versus the Heat. That's a coin flip. I've got it literally 51-48. I probably will downgrade the Heat a little bit based off of their early start in power rating. So that would be a little bit higher for the Knicks. They face the Charlotte Hornets at home. So this is kind of the opposite of how we've looked at some of the West ones, where I was like, look, they got coin flips on the road. This is the opposite, where I like the Knicks' chances at, like, they've got one that's a lock on the road and one that's a lock at home. That's enough to get me where I'm like, look, all I need is for the Knicks to go 3-1, lose to the Bucks, but the Bucks go 2-2 because somebody has an ankle on a very old and injury prone team. And I've got the Knicks there at 4-1. I love the Knicks at 4-1 in this group.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, and it's kind
Awesome.
of the same, similar to that kind of ARB situation that I mentioned with the Suns. The Knicks play the Bucks first game, as you mentioned, and and that's in the Garden. So one thing you could do is if let's say because I'm not that worried about the Wizards or the Hornets. Not that they couldn't do something, but I I'm just not super concerned about that. I think this is one of the weaker groups, which is why I honed in on it again. Um,
Yeah.
but I think the concern is the Heat. I'm a little lower on the Heat generally, but so I'm really only looking at the Bucks and the Knicks. But you mentioned the minus number, ridiculous. No, I'm not doing that. So I'm taking the Knicks, and then if they win in the Garden in Game 1, that number might get longer for the Bucks. I don't know how if it's starting at a minus number, it might not get that much longer, but there could be another kind of ARB situation if the Knicks win that Game 1, which is another reason I like it.
Nice. And then finally, we've got Group A, which is Philly, Cleveland, Atlanta, Indy, and Detroit. Checking out the market on that group, we've got Philly at plus 175, featuring, I guess, Robert Covington and Nick Batum. Cleveland Cavaliers 2-1. No timeline on Darius Garland or Jared Allen yet, so don't know when they're going to be back. The Atlanta Hawks plus 450. The Pacers 6-1, and the Pistons at 10-1. In this group, I do have a play on the Cavaliers that I bet in preseason. If you listen to our win total pods, you know that like Brandon and I were very high on the Cavaliers. Still high on the Cavaliers, but they're extremely injured. So I'm probably going to be looking for a spot to go in a different direction here. I'm curious what you have for a best bet, and then I'll talk about where I want to go now that the Cavs are seemingly pretty injured and I've already got that position established.
Yeah, so this is another pretty tough group, I think. There's a lot of good teams in this one, and but I mean, I would probably have to look to the Pacers here. I think you mentioned 6-1. Was that the number? 6-1 for the Pacers, like that. I mean, their offense, it hasn't quite shown up in the numbers yet. Their game against the Bulls last night was surprisingly low. I think they scored 104 points.
They missed a ton of threes in that game, or that's a blowout. They missed so many good looks in that game. It was just one of those NBA nights. As somebody who had the over in that game, I can tell you exactly what it felt like watching them clank shot after shot after shot.
Yeah. Yep. So, I actually did kind of stay away from this one. It's one where I could be convinced. But I mean, even the Pistons that's the worst team in this group, but they're frisky at least. I mean, I don't know. I debated even throwing going with a Brandon Anderson move and just putting a little money on the long shot Pistons to win this group, but it's just too stacked. I think there's too many good teams in here. I'm very high on the Cavs as well. In fact, preseason, I was looking to bet them maybe to win the tournament, this in-season tournament, because I thought they had a good blend, and I still kind of do, but the injury factor is just a little too much. But I think they have a good blend of motivation, right? A disappointing playoff exit, continuity. They added some guys on the margins, right? Max Strus, George Niang. They needed that shooting. They got it. But the injury is just a little concerning. The injuries, if it was longer, I'd definitely look at the Cavs. They play Indy Game 1 and then Detroit at home. So, I mean, those first two games I think will be telling. But, as of right now, I do not have a best bet on this. But again, curious to hear your thoughts, I guess. If you, I'm open. I'm willing to be swayed in one direction or another. If you have
this one should be fun. Detroit's much better than I thought they were going to be. They look competent, and they haven't even gotten Burks and Bojan back yet. So,
Bojan, yeah,
yes, Bojan. They haven't gotten those guys back yet, so there's a little bit of upside there. The Cavs might also they play the Pacers right off the bat on Friday, and if the Pacers win, that number drops. So I'm gonna bet Pacers 6-1, and then if the Pacers win that game, I will probably come back on Cavs. If you're like, why don't you want the Sixers? They've probably been the best team. You're probably right. Like I don't think you're wrong that like the Sixers have been the best team. They're going to be favored in all these matchups. Like that's why they are the favorite in this group. But they got the Pacers at home. They've got the Hawks on the road. They've got the Cavs at home in the final one. So all of those to me kind of like they're going to start with a win over the Pistons on the 10th. They play the Pacers at home. That one I've got the Sixers should win, but I've upgraded the Pacers a little bit. The Sixers face the Hawks. I've got the Hawks as a slight favorite in that game based off of power rating. And then they're facing the Cavs at home, and I've got that one much closer to a coin flip. So that's kind of the key here is that I have two games in this group where the Sixers are much closer to a coin flip or a dog than they are significant favorites. They don't have like 3 games where I'm like they're going to be at least be 3-1 or 3. They're going to have 3 games locked in, and it'll come down to whether they go 4-0 or 3-1. I could see the Sixers going 2-2, which is why I think there's probably value on the Pacers 6-1, and then we'll go from there. I think Finals MVP, Tournament MVP, Cup MVP is a much more interesting market. I am kind of curious though. Before we go there to close it out, I'm not going to bet the winner. I don't have like a lot of interest in betting the tournament winner because the very nature of the NBA season, okay, we've talked about player effort and player rest and player blah, 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 like all of these factors. There's also shit like last night where the Pacers should have smoked the Bulls in that game by about 15 points and they shot 20% from 3. That's just how it goes in the NBA now. If 3-point variance has never been more important, I don't want to tie up. I'm willing to tie up my money for months and months and months doing all the futures that we do, but I don't want to tie up my money until December without knowing this. Like I can just wait, look at the bracket, and then we'll have better value once I get the bracket for the in-season tournament, and we'll have episodes breaking all that down. So I personally don't want to bet any team to win the tournament. Do you?
No, I'm right there with you. I think the tournament MVP can be kind of a proxy for those who's going to win
Yes.
bets. So I'd much rather look at that at that market because that's going to give you longer odds. So why not just take, especially for the teams that could make that splash, right? So you have a couple plays on that on the MVP market. So Shea is one of them. I don't want to step on your final or your in-season MVP bet, but for instance, Shea, if the Thunder make it, if they win this thing, he's going to win. He has to be outstanding. So
it's not going to be Isaiah Joe.
No, it's not. And even if someone like that has a great game, like if Shea, as long as Shea's not horrible, they're going to give it to him, right? So
yeah,
and they're not going to win if he's horrible. So I think that's a much better market to go after. So yeah, I'm like you, and you bring this up with the playoffs as well. There's for those favorites, you're not going to lose that much value right before the playoffs start, or in this case, right before the knockout round begins. I think that's a little bit less the case in this market because they are just longer odds, right? So the favorite is 700 plus 700 instead of plus like 3 whatever. I can't remember what the exact number is for that, but so it is going to be a little bit longer. You might lose more value, but you'll have more information, and even relative to the playoffs, because it's not going to take as long. There's only going to be 4 games once you get out of the group stage. So you're not actually like an entire playoffs. There's actually kind of more things will even out a little more. I think those. I think we'll have more relevant information. So we're getting like a week's worth basically of time that we need teams to be good for, rather than like a month and a half or whatever it is for the actual NBA playoffs.
The markets on this are nuts.
Yeah.
And it's great. And so I'm going to step out of kind of my own perceptions here. I have the guys that I'm going to bet, and I'll talk about another one I'm going to add. I got 3 best bets for it and an ad, and we talked about them before on long shots and preseason bets. But stepping out of like what I think of the good players, etc. If you've listened to this and you're like, Matt's crazy, the Sixers are winning that group. They're absolutely winning that group. Okay. Then guess what? You should probably be looking at Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid. Bet both of those because you can get really good numbers on them. The market is all over the board. At one book, Nikola Jokic is 12-1 and Kevin Durant is 26-1. Okay. At another book, Kevin Durant is 16-1 versus 26-1. And there are numbers on down from there in terms of like who's going to wind up winning this thing, including a 14-1 on Nikola Jokic versus a 12-1. There's all these numbers that you can get on the in-season tournament that provide you with value. You can get a wide range of those. So if there is a team, I will say this too, because this is single elimination, like bear in mind this, if your team wins your group, just wins the group, you got to win 3 games. That's it. And really 2 for you to be in a chef's kiss hedging situation. If you get a player right now at 40-1 and they wind up in the final as the best player and they're playing in that final, you can just money line out the other side and you're going to come out way ahead. So there's really good value here. I think this is a great market for us to bet into because the books are offering it and there is so much volatility. Now, maybe we're wrong. Maybe this isn't volatile. Maybe the finals are going to be Bucks, Nuggets, Sixers, Suns, right? Like it's entirely possible. And we'll react to that and we'll learn that for next year or not. We'll say maybe it was a one-off or whatever. But there's a lot of value here. The 3 I will give out, and then I'll add another one. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander right now, to me, has the best value. Now, look, that's not surprising. I gave him out as the actual MVP, as the season-long MVP. There's a 25-1 on Shai. You're telling me that Shai can't be, if the Thunder sneak into the tournament, even as a wild card, you're telling me Shai Gilgeous-Alexander can't be the best player in the league for 3 days? At 25-1? That's crazy.
Yeah.
Tyrese Halliburton is the other one. We talked about the Pacers. If the Pacers get in, it's going to be Halliburton. And there's a 45-1 on Tyrese Halliburton in the market right now. And then the beast, Zion Williamson, who I hear if you're like, what about him being healthy? I get it. But look, you're going to get 6 weeks of play. That's it. We got to survive 6 weeks. And then Zion can get injured again. Zion's 45-1 as well. The one I will add to this that I'm going to put in the app after we finish recording is going to be Luka Doncic, 25-1. Again, you're telling me that if I think the Mavericks are going to win their group, I have a bet on them to win their group. So they're going to be in the single knockout stage. I have got 25-1 on Luka to be the best player and get his team 3 wins in 5 days. Yeah, I'll take that. I'll absolutely take that. So I love this market. I'm very excited about it. I'm trying not to overbet it, Andrew, is what I'm telling you.
Yeah. I'm right there with you. I mean, I think, but again, I think you can kind of play once we have a little more information, you can still play this market somewhat. The only thing I would add, I'm right there with you on all these markets. Sorry, I got to adjust my webcam here. One thing that I'll add is Maxey. I think so. I mentioned the ability to. Oh my God, I'm sorry. The ability to play this market as a proxy for the finals or the winner of the in-season tournament. And that's kind of what the play on Maxey is. Brandon gave out, I think you mentioned it as well, the Maxey MIP, right? Most improved player. He's going to have to win. So that's a narrative award. All these awards are narrative, right? He's going to have to win these big, not have to, but it's going to go a long way towards his most improved case if he wins these in-season tournament games. If they play well, that's only going to be good for his. I don't think it's going to break him. I don't think if the Sixers do poorly in this tournament, I don't think that's like going to ruin his chances. But I also think that him I think the Sixers have looked great on offense. I think with their additions of Robert Covington, they losing PJ is big. I mean, that is a tough loss for them. But I think that I would rather play Maxey as MIP, or sorry, Maxey as the tournament MVP as a play on a long shot for the Sixers to win this thing. I think he's going to have to be good if they're going to have a chance to win this thing, and I think they might be able to. So,
my question though is, if they win the group, what does Joel's number go to for MVP? Right.
Right.
And that might be the key here. Is if you look at that group and you're just like, it's the Sixers, they're gonna thump this group, which I don't blame you for saying. The Sixers are really good, and that group in particular is, how can I put this? They're fun, so they get people like me that are all like, ooh, the Cavs, and hey, the Hawks and Quinn Snyder, and the Indiana Pacers, and how about that Jalen Duren? And it's like, none of these teams, especially without Garland and Allen currently, none of those teams are in Philly's weight class. They're just not in Philly's weight class, right?
Yeah.
If you're just like, I want to keep this simple, Philly's the best team in that group, I'll take Philly. The way to do this is to bet Maxey to win tournament MVP. And then if they win their group, then you bet Joel Embiid immediately before the first tournament game. Like, don't wait, because every single game that's going to get shortened and shortened and shortened. And honestly, like, there's a chance that Joel winds up, like, if the Nuggets don't make it and the Celtics don't make it and the Bucks don't make it, the Sixers could be the favorite to win that thing. And then Joel's number gets into sub 300, maybe 200, maybe closer to pick them, right? And so that to me is where the danger comes in here. Is I have a hard time believing that, how can I put this? Voters not only have to vote for Maxey over Joel when they know that Joel's the better player, but Joel has to be okay with Maxey having better games than him. And if Maxey has a monster game, Joel's going to make sure that he's still got 26, 14, and 4. So that would be my play on. That would be my consideration for how you bet Tyrese Maxey in particular.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and for that play as well, that was also a big a numbers play for me too. There's obviously a very clear path for Joel to get that MVP. He literally won the MVP of the regular season last year, so certainly a clear path for that. But I found an 80-1 out there, which is like insane. So yeah, I at 80-1, that's like, for a guy who's the odds-on favorite to win Most Improved Player. I think there's a world where he does. Well, here's another thing I'll throw out. What if? Is there any chance? Do you think the Sixers have a chance if Embiid is not healthy? If Embiid is injured for any part of this, do they still have a chance? Like, if they get through that, let's say they get out of their group stage. I mean, I know that's like a kind of niche scenario, but
I'm trying to think. The reason I don't like it, I see what you're saying. The problem is it's like, hey, what if they get out of their group somehow, and then everybody else in their group is not very good, and Joel's out.
Right.
And it's like, or everybody else in the tournament field is not very good. What if it's a bunch of, like, if it's not Portland, but if it's those mid-tier teams that we kind of want to bet in this tournament, right? Can, like, the Sixers take the Mavericks in a one game a night? You only got to win 3 games. I get it. It's just like, now you're starting to get into, like, well, everything's random and they should all be even. And that's where I think when we're trying to game this out, that's where I think that falls apart. So
yeah,
I don't think it's a bad bet, because it's possible that if, like, let's say that it goes this way in the semifinals at home, Maxey scores 30 and 6, Joel goes for 28 and 17, right? In the second game, Maxey has a quieter game and he has like 14, and Joel carries them in the defensive struggle versus whoever, right? And then in the last game, in the championship game, then Maxey's the best player on the court in that game. That gets him home. There will be a recency bias. It's going to be hard for someone who was the better player throughout the entire tournament, but not the best in that game, to win it. So if the Sixers get there, even if it's like Joel's a minus number at that point, all Maxey's got to do is go for 35 in the win, And as long as hasn't been terrible in the other tournament games, he wins. So I think there's probably some value there. This is what makes it fun, is the NBA has put a chaotic environment in front of us. The markets have given us a whole board, and we have lots to bet. And we're going to be talking about it week by week over the next 4 weeks of the tournament group games and into December, where I will be in Vegas for the in-season tournament championship. Very excited to do that. Andrew O'Connor Watts is in the Action Network app and on Twitter. Make sure to check him out and follow him. My thanks to David Payne, our producer, as well as our great group of guys, Hutton Jackson and the crew over on video, putting these up on YouTube, youtube.com/the Action Network. We will be back. This is a bonus episode. We have best bets nightly throughout the week, and we'll be back on Friday with a futures look. Sunday, we'll have a futures look for Monday, best bets for Monday, and we will have a look at the in-season tournament night 1 from Friday and how to bet that on Tuesday. As an addition, I've got a great interview with a great writer, Rich Cohen, about his new book on the 88 season. I have so much stuff for you. I have 2 columns on the Harden trade, and I'm writing a third. Check out the Action Network app. You want more? I know you want more NBA. Go get it. Go get it in the Action Network app. We'll see you guys again next time. And until then, let's get buckets.